Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim. This is another Real Ideal Gear review. Today we're looking at the Casio W201, a cousin of the F201, one of my favorite budget watches of all time. This watch, the W201, has some upgraded things about it. There's some things about it I'm not a huge fan of. Let's get going with the regular addition for this watch, which is size, fitment, finish, accuracy, legibility, and light. So first off, the size of this watch, it is a compact watch, very small, lightweight. It's a very slim watch. Much like its F201 cousin, this watch is a great watch just kind of for that low profile, fits easily under a cuff. Not a lot of maintenance needed whatsoever. It has a 10-year battery. It has 50 meters of water resistance. So this watch actually has an upgraded water resistance rating from the F201. I like those features quite a bit. I think this watch really does fit kind of that discreet, everyday kind of watch. Fits a lot of wrists. So from anyone from a large size wrist, above average size wrist, it's going to fit you because it has a long strap on here. As far as fitment goes, it's this typical Casio fitment that I always complain about. The holes in the strap are just too far apart for a fine or a refined fit for the watch. This watch happens to fit just fine, so I'm okay with that. The buckle itself is a plastic pin buckle system. The keeper is not a ratcheting keeper system, so it will slide around a little bit on you, especially if you have a smaller wrist. You're going to have more of a tag end sticking out, and that keeper is going to be really important to keep in place so it doesn't catch on, the tag end doesn't catch on things as you're wearing the watch. But overall, the fitment is great. It's a lightweight watch. The dimensions of the watch are small. I'll put the dimensions here in the video so that you can see that. The size and fitment overall, great combination, typical kind of smaller Casio watch that you might see. I think it's an upgraded version of the F91, which just about everything is an upgrade from the F91. But this watch, I think, it does a very good job with that as far as size and fitment goes. Now the finish, it's kind of a gray colored watch. It's not the typical dark black resin case, resin strap kind of look that you get from a Casio. And I chose that. I wanted to go something a little bit lighter, just kind of see what the different colors are that are out there. And I kind of like this one. I like the fact that the case and the strap are both gray. I bought another negative display watch, and it's the W736, which has a black case and a gray strap. Not really a fan of that kind of combination. I'm going to give it a little more time and see how that works out. But this is all gray. Case and strap are all gray, which is nice. The finish, otherwise, it is the typical acrylic. It is the typical acrylic crystal that covers the display, and overall the finish is kind of your typical Casio finish. Now let's get into the functions, because I think this is where the functions are important when it comes down to the value of the watch and what it provides to you as the consumer. You're going to have the typical stopwatch, alarm, timer, and dual time modes in here. Something to keep in mind though that's different from the F201 and the W201. The F201, you can program the alarm. You have multiple alarms to choose from. So in that sense, the F201 provides you a greater value in the modes that you have to choose from than the W201. Now the W201 has 50 meters of water resistance. So for that reason, you're getting a little bit more on the protection side. But the F201 is water resistant, so hand washing, things like that, and even some people will swim with it too, is much better. Now overall use of the watch, getting at the functions and making adjustments, are these small buttons. And this is one of my biggest gripes with this watch, are the buttons. The buttons are way too small. There's no case design that guides you to the button. And one of the things I found when I wore this watch at night, because I wear all of these watches that I review for multiple days on end, was when I wanted to use the light feature at night, I had a hard time finding where the button was on the side of the case. Now that's different from the square, which also has a recessed button. There's kind of a design in the case that guides your finger to the button itself. This does not have that. So the button is actually flush to the side of the case. So to find it, you actually have to get on the underside of the case where there's a little bit of a cutout around the button, and you can feel where the button is from there. So to me, the button layout is just not user-friendly. Now, the F201 has buttons that kind of stick out from the sides, and sometimes you accidentally press those when I'm putting the watch on my wrist or taking it off. But I've never had an issue of that watch, the buttons being pressed while I was wearing the watch. And maybe some of you out there have had that issue, but this watch resolves that issue if you had, buttons being pressed that you don't want to be pressed. But I think it creates a bigger issue, which is using these buttons from just a tactile perspective of without looking at it, where are the buttons at? They're just hard to find, hard to actuate. Accuracy is typical quartz accuracy, has a 10-year battery. So the maintenance of this watch, this is definitely a grab-and-go watch. Now the negative display, this is one of 2 watches that I've purchased that have a negative display. And I've never been a fan of negative display, even from afar. And that's kind of been my hang-up over the past, handful of years. I've just never liked negative displays. But I thought if I'm reviewing watches, I should at least give them a chance, get a negative display or 2 in front of me, and that's what I've done. So I've got the negative display in front of me, and I have to say, under normal lighting conditions, it's all right. I can see the time just fine. And when it comes down to low light conditions, it is horrible because there's just not enough light to reflect off of the display features that give you that readout of what the watch is trying to tell you. Okay, so you need light in order to read the negative display. And it's almost kind of like a privacy screen that you might see in a computer when you go into like a receptionist room at a doctor's office, where at a certain angle you just can't read anything on the screen. Well, that's kind of the sensation or the impression that I get with these negative displays on the watch here on the W201, is that from a certain angle you can't really read it, but when you get the perfect angle, you can read it just fine. You also need to have the right amount of light to do something like that. So as far as the negative display goes, it's okay, it's workable. Now the rest of it, as far as the day and the date, it's not quite as big as I'd like, and I think that could be improved. And this is where I think the negative display starts to work against any kind of information that doesn't have the high contrast you have under the normal display. So for that reason, I'm just not a huge fan of the negative display for this particular model. There's also a status indicator, countdown bar, whatever it is, just wasting space. I don't need to know that. I can see it mimics the second counter on the time. So why do you have that on there? It's just a graphic display of every 10 seconds. It cycles from a count down to a count up kind of a thing as far as the graphic display is concerned. So to me, it's just one of those things, again, like you could have made the display bigger, more legible. The day and the date could have been bigger, more legible. Or, and here's the next one, the indicators as far as the alarm is on or off, those kind of things, it's terrible. So to me, there's this combination of things that happen with a negative display that really kind of combine to make the legibility of other things other than the time much more difficult to read. Now the numbers, the time is easy to read. The numbers are nice and big. I like it. It's very similar to the F201 in that sense. But the W201 is really lacking on the rest of it. It just becomes harder and harder to read, especially for a guy like me who has reading glasses. The light itself is okay, so when you hit the light at night, it's fine. If you can find the button to turn the light on, it's fine. It works just fine. It's a cheaper watch. You're not going to have a lot of different functions on this. You're not going to have multiple LED lights on there as well. So as far as the effectiveness of the light, it's okay. One of the major differences between the F201 and the W201 is the alarm function. The F201, you have multiple alarms and you can program a day date. You can have it go off on a specific date every month. You can have it go off every day of a month. And you can also have it go off a specific day date in a month. So a lot of great features with that alarm. Not the case with the W201. I wish they would have kept that on here. I think that would have really helped the score overall and the desirability of this watch overall. I didn't mention this, but the strap itself is one that does lay flat. And so for some of the Casio watches, you do have that kind of integrated strap bracelet kind of feel to it where you can't really lay the watch flat. This watch you can lay flat, which I think is fantastic. So the pros for this watch are the legibility is great as far as the time is concerned. The size is awesome. It's lightweight. It's slim. It's also 50 meters of water resistance, has a 10-year battery. All of those are great things. The cons in this watch, the alert notification, when it comes down to seeing what you have going on the display is very difficult to read. Even with my glasses on, I have a hard time reading under perfect lighting conditions. So this is where the negative display is not helping at all. The buttons on this watch are just really difficult to find, and the contrast during the low light conditions is probably the worst of all scenarios that you could have with this watch, because there's not enough light to reflect off of the negative display numbers, and it's not dark enough really where the light is going to help a lot too. So to me, it's kind of in that weird no man's land when it comes down to legibility, which I'm not a real fan of. So is this a watch I recommend? This is the first watch of the year. I don't recommend this watch, and it's kind of a close call. It's kind of that just below the 9.0 rating, which is my minimum cutoff for a recommend or not recommend. It's an 8.8 out of 10. So I'm not really recommending this watch. I think for some people, they might like it. For most people, I think it's just going to be a little bit too difficult to use overall. It's a great value watch. It's just the legibility really suffers with this watch in particular. And dang it, they didn't use the space efficiently on the display again. So cut it out with some of that stuff and just let me know what the time is, and keep all the flashing lights and everything else off the dial itself or off the display itself. So there you go. Put your comments down below what you think of this watch. If you're a W201 owner and you want to sound off against what I've just said, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear it. And again, it's close. It's just, I just can't recommend this watch. So there you go. My name is Tim. This has been another Real Ideal Gear Review. We'll catch you guys next time.